Hi, friends, and welcome to the series Julius Caesar. And I would think that if you are on this lesson, then probably you might be interested in Shakespearean literature more than what ordinary people are. So, Shakespeare is something you can just delve deeper and deeper into. So, here we are intervening into Shakespearean literature, and here we'll not only just study Julius Caesar, but we'll be getting more and more into why Shakespeare wrote and for whom did he write. That's a very integral question because before you are reading something, you need to know the background. Why did the person who wrote it literally write it? So that's important. And here's this new lesson presented by me, Palak Sharma. Few things about me: I'm an economics honors student, a poet at heart, a theatre geek, and that's why I'm here with Julius Caesar, a mixture of Keynes and Shakespeare. And do not forget the 3 R's and the S: rate, review, recommend, and share the lessons. So, the basic question: for whom did Shakespeare write? That's a question that we need to answer because before you go ahead and think that if somebody from 21st century goes to Shakespeare of that time and says him that, hey, I know you are such a great person and you are revered as the king of literature in our times, then trust me, Shakespeare would be flabbergasted. He would not believe, he would be baffled at hearing this from you because really, Shakespeare never wrote for the love of literature. He simply wrote it for money. That's it. He was never into literature. He wrote it for dollars. That's it. That's what he wanted. He wrote for being performed on the global theatres of London. He never knew that you people might be reading it in high school or in colleges, and he was not aware that 60 years down the lane, people will be selling the copies of his plays. Because imagine, last night you saw an episode of your favorite show. Will not venture into Indian TV series because then you will be getting mixed up because no one goes to read an Hindi TV series. So suppose you're watching Walking Dead last night, you were watching it, and now you think that it was really superb episode and you need to take a hard copy, you need to read it. So what if you go to a bookstore, and ask them that give me the copy, give me the script of the play of the last night episode of The Walking Dead? Do you think they'll be answering you with a positive smile? They'll be looking at you like you are a fool, asking for last night's episode script. It's not common, it's not popular. Nobody gives you scripts like that. So, this is what happened. Shakespeare's plays were never sold as on written papers, as books, or as written plays while he was alive. It was 60 years after his death that the first copy of his plays written on a piece of paper were passed as a book. That's important because then you'll realize that his plays are not meant to be read. They are meant to be viewed. They are meant to be seen in theaters. They are meant to be acted out. So you'll notice at some places that these plays are turning boring, but they're just turning boring for you. You'll fall out of lane because you'll not find it adhering to the guidelines of literature. Because that's when you'll realize that Shakespeare didn't write just for the elite classes, the intellectuals. I'll give you a scenario of the London in those times in 16th century. What actually happened was, like, consider people who have come, like, there's a bear. First of all, consider a bear. He has been left hungry for around 10 days. He has been poked, and poking any animal makes him angry. So he's angry now. So after 10 days, he's brought to a ground which looks something like this. There's a circular pattern around it, and there are people who can stand over there on the pedestals over here which are kept. And what happens now is there are 10 dogs who are left out on this beer, and all they have to do is just tear him apart, blood smearing on their faces, and that's how the scene takes place. And do you think London people enjoy this? You would say no, but hell, they enjoyed it. They enjoyed it a lot. This is what a typical beer waiting scene looked like. And there were people standing here on the balconies. And just imagine where would the ticket be the highest. The highest tickets were not for the one who was sitting up there. The highest ticket was for the one who was sitting just round there, around this beer, who was being baited by all these dogs, who was being eaten wildly, ripped apart by these dogs. And they enjoyed. They were shouting, "Hoa, hoa, the beer, eat the beer." There were people who were shouting like that, okay? And these same people with their faces smeared with the blood of this beer, they would go to these kind of theaters to watch Shakespeare's plays, and they would be sitting down here. Now imagine Shakespeare's plays. Can you mix it up? So every time you're reading a play of Shakespeare, you will find that there are some parts which are just like above average. They are fabulous parts where you'll find yourself delving deeper into Shakespeare. But there'll be some parts which are simply trash with useless sexual innuendos and useless stuff, redundant stuff, like one girl who's being pestered by four guys together on a street and all these kind of things. But these kind of things are not just meant for these elite classes who are sitting right up there. They were meant for the groundlings, as we call them, the groundlings who were sitting down watching plays of Shakespeare with their faces smeared with bloods. They would not understand Hamlet saying to be or not to be. It was none of their matter. They rather preferred Ophelia being harnessed by someone. They would prefer that kind of stuff where there is someone who's dragging a woman into a kind of sexual act, being kissed brutally. These kind of things appealed them. And by the time, look, what happened is like first, in like we'll give an example of play Hamlet. There's here Hamlet. He's saying the very famous to be or not to be speech right here with the skull in his hand. So when he leave the audiences with a question to be or not to be, the elite classes who are sitting right up here will be busy thinking, oh my god, what did he say? That's a serious question, to be or not to be. They'll be pondering over what Hamlet has already spoken. And the next scene, we'll see Ophelia being offended, Ophelia being dragged, Ophelia being kissed brutally. So these kind of things are for the groundlings. In the meantime, when the intellectuals are thinking about Hamlet's question, to be or not to be, the groundlings will be enjoying like Ophelia being dragged into sexual acts. This will attract them, this will make them shout, and by the time the intellectuals will be thinking about the speech of Hamlet, so they'll be enjoying. And once the next scene comes where there's something more intellectual for the intellectual ones, the groundlings will be enjoying the Ophelia scene. They'll be thinking about, oh my god, what he did with Ophelia, it was so awesome, it was so nice. So these kind of things were meant for both the classes. Both the elites and the groundlings enjoyed while Shakespeare wrote. And this was the beauty of his writing, that he pleased everyone. Everyone was flattered in a global theatre in London because there was some pie of cake for everyone who was present there. There were sexual innuendos for the groundling, there were high intellectual stuff for the elite classes. So everyone was pleased, in short. And now we come to the question that what is the segregation of Shakespearean plays? That is again an important question because we need to delve deeper if we need to study Shakespeare in a very elaborative manner. So according to the Aristotelian view of the great drama tragedy, it says that what actually tragedy is, that the protagonist, who's the character with whom the audiences most identify, that character begins in an elevated state. He is someone as high as a king or a prince, and then through a process, he will fall due to excessive pride. He will fall. And that's an important characteristic of a tragedy because the highly elevated character, the protagonist, will be falling down. He'll be ruined, wife gone, kingdom lost. He'll be a broken man. So that fall of the tragic hero will lead to two things in the audiences. There'll be fear. Second, there'll be pity. So Aristotelian view of tragedy goes that highly elevated person going down to ruins. Then Aristotelian politics, the book in which he wrote about the great drama, the other part is lost. It was lost in the fire of Alexandria. But we don't know what exactly comedy was according to Aristotle. But we know that comedy is exactly the inverse process of tragedy. So here what happens in a comedy is that the hero begins in a low state. He's nobody at all. Then through a series of actions, he's elevated to someone great. That's what happens. So for Shakespeare, his tragedies begin in order and they end in disorder. So we can suppose that his tragedy begins with some sense of harmony, but by the end of the play, there is no harmony. Things have fallen apart and their things are not well. In comedies, it's exactly the opposite. They begin with a very silly problem, like you can have any problem at all. But they end in a sense of order. There is harmony at the end in a comedy. There could be a marriage, there could be a great union. Because for Shakespeare, marriage was the greatest union. You can see plays like The Tempest, Much Ado About Nothing, The Twelfth Night. These are all comedies, and you can always see that there's a pattern of being a marriage at the end of the play. There's a sense of order. The third part, the histories, it was all covered, like in history, he covered the important English monarchs like Henry IV, Henry V, Richard II are one of the important ones. He drew from historical documents. That's an important thing again. If you need to know something very quirky about Shakespeare, it was that he wrote plays which were drawn from historical documents. But you'll realize that much of what he writes becomes English history. That's right, because that's important. People considered it the history only, but most of that what he wrote was made up. But within 2 generations, the plays became so popular that they replaced the original history. So his histories were not only historical plays, they were no more a part of fiction. They became history. They became the history of England. That's important because you should now understand how much people revere Shakespeare. That's how he's revered. So before we venture into Shakespeare plays like JC, we'll first know the layout of a Shakespearean play. And you must remember that Shakespearean plays are not intended to be read. They are intended to be viewed. Okay, so you must know one more thing, that his plays are always divided into 5 acts, and each 5 act is divided into a scene, 2 scenes, 3 scenes. There can be any number of scenes. So his plays, I'll give you a layout that is 5 acts and more scenes, and because his plays are like a topographical land, so if you are moving on it, you need to have a map on your hand right there, that there are 5 acts and each act has different kind of scenes. And for more, you can view the overview of the course once more to know more about how many scenes are there in each act. That's important again, because now from the next lesson we'll be starting with Act 1 and Act 2 as well of Scene First. I mean Act 1 and Scene First and Scene 2. I'm so sorry for the delay. And that's what we'll be doing next. So yeah, that's it. Thank you. And do not forget the 3 R's in the S: rate, review, recommend, and share the lessons. Thank you.